Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The wind had a voice tonight. It hissed through the jagged teeth of the peaks, a cold sound that promised ice and emptiness. It whispered of things that hunted when the moon was a sliver of bone in the sky. I heard it. I listened. The silence that followed was worse. It was the sound of a predator holding its breath, and I was there to meet it. My boots made no noise on the frozen crust of snow. Years of this life had taught me how to move like a ghost, a sliver of shadow against the ancient stone. My breath plumed, then vanished. My heart beat a slow, steady drum against my ribs, a rhythm known only to the hunter and the hunted. Tonight, I was both. The scent hit me first, foul, like grave dirt and rotting meat left too long in the sun. It clung to the air, a greasy film that made the back of my throat itch. A grieve white, old, hungry, and far from its usual territory. They were creatures of spite, all spindly limbs and too many joints, with claws that could peel the hide from a tree, wolf-like fruit. My pack had cast me out for being wolfless, a broken thing, an omega curse, but they had no idea what lurked in the darkness they feared. I did. I made it my life to know. A sound cut through the wind's howl, a sharp crack, like a great tree limb snapping under the weight of snow. It was followed by a low, guttural snarl that was not the grieve whites. Something else was up here. Something powerful. My hand went to the hilt of the silver-etched blade at my hip. Its leather grip was worn smooth by my palm, a familiar comfort in a world that had offered me none. I moved toward the sound, senses screaming, every nerve alight. The pines grew thick here, their boughs heavy with white, creating a labyrinth of darkness and moonlight. The smell of blood reached me next. So much of it. It was a coppery, vibrant scent that steamed in the frigid air, melting patches of snow down to the frozen earth. It wasn't just the monster's ichor, which smelled black and stagnant. This was wolf blood, rich, potent, and alpha's blood. I froze, crouching behind the broad trunk of an ironwood. My pulse, once so steady, now stumbled. No pack ventured this high. The territorial lines were ancient, respected. To cross them was to invite war. Who would be so foolish, or so desperate? I peered through the branches. The clearing was a nightmare painted in crimson and white. The grieve white was there, its unnatural form hunched and twisted. It was bigger than any I'd ever seen, its hide the color of a fresh bruise, its head lolling on a neck that was too long, too thin. Its claws, black as obsidian, were dripping. But it was not alone. It stood over a figure, a man, half buried in a snowdrift, his form a slash of darkness against the pristine white. He was massive, built with the sheer, unyielding power of a true alpha. His clothes, fine black leather and thick winter furs, were shredded, soaked through with the blood that stained the snow around him. He was still, breathing. I could see the faint puff of it, a ghost in the air. The grieve white lowered its head, its jaw unhinging with a series of wet clicks. It was going for the kill. For the throat. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the odds. Survival is an instinct, not a choice. He was a wolf, and that thing was an abomination. That was all that mattered. I broke from the trees, my blade singing as it left its sheath. The monster's head snapped up, its multiple, pinprick eyes fixing on me. It let out a chittering hiss, a sound of annoyance, as if I were a fly to be swatted. It dismissed me. Good. Everyone always did. I didn't charge. I circled, my movements fluid, keeping my weight on the balls of my feet. It was fast, but clumsy. All its strength was in those horrifying claws. "Get away from him," I said. My voice was rough from disuse, a strange, low thing in the vast silence. The grieve white tilted its head, a sickening, bird-like motion. It took a step toward me, dragging one of its claws through the snow, leaving a deep furrow. It was toying with me, showing me what it could do. I let it come. Closer. Just a little closer. It lunged. A blur of bruised flesh and black talons. I dropped, sliding on the ice-crusted snow beneath its attack. The claws whistled inches above my head, the wind of their passage cold on my neck. I came up on one knee, driving my blade upward, sinking it deep into the creature's thin, unprotected flank. It shrieked, a sound that cracked the air, and spun around, backhanding me with a limb that felt like solid rock. Pain exploded in my side. I flew through the air, landing hard against a snowbank that did little to cushion the blow. The world swam, black spots dancing in my vision. My ribs screamed. At least 2 were broken, maybe more. I tasted blood. My own. The man on the ground groaned, a deep, resonant sound of pure agony. It cut through my pain. It focused me. The grieve wight turned its attention back to him, its small victory over, me forgotten. It saw him as the greater prize, the easier meal. No. I pushed myself up, ignoring the fire in my chest. I ripped a strip of cloth from my tunic, wrapping it tight around my hand and the hilt of my dagger. I wouldn't lose my grip again. The creature was leaning over the man, its foul breath misting around his head. I ran. Not with grace this time, but with a desperate, ragged fury. I launched myself onto its back, my legs wrapping around its narrow torso, my left arm locking around its throat. It thrashed, trying to throw me, its limbs flailing wildly. I held on, my muscles screaming. With my right hand, I plunged the silvered blade into the soft spot where its neck met its skull. I pushed, deeper. I felt the vertebrae grind, then sever. The chittering stopped. The thrashing ceased. The grieve wight stood motionless for one long, silent second. Then it crumpled, collapsing into a heap of twitching limbs, its black blood pouring onto the snow, sizzling as it touched the silver of my blade. Silence returned, heavy, absolute. The only sounds were the moaning of the wind and the ragged tear of my own breathing. I slid off the carcass, my legs trembling. My entire body was a map of pain. But I was alive, and so was the man. I limped toward him, my dagger still in my hand, dripping with the monster's filth. Caution was etched into my bones. He was a stranger, an alpha. And alphas were never good news for omegas like me. As I got closer, another scent became clear, hidden beneath the blood and the cold. It was him, ozone, like the air after a lightning strike, deep earth and winter pine. It was a scent of command, of ancient power, of a storm held barely in check. It coiled around me, sinking into me, making something deep inside my chest ache with a feeling I had no name for. It felt like home. A home I'd never known. I knelt beside him, my knees sinking into the blood-soaked snow. His face was turned to the side, half hidden by a tangle of dark hair, stark against the white. A deep gash ran from his temple down his cheek, brutal and raw. But even through the blood and grime, his features were sharp, carved from granite and shadow. He was no ordinary alpha. I brushed the hair from his forehead. My fingers trembled. The moment my skin touched his, a jolt went through me, a current of heat, of energy, that made my breath catch. His eyes fluttered open. They weren't the gold or brown of most wolves. They were the color of a winter sky just before the blizzard hits. A piercing, stormy gray, shot through with chips of silver. They were the eyes of a king. My blood ran cold. I knew him. Everyone knew him. Orvan Crestfall, the alpha king of the northern clans. A man more myth than wolf, said to have a heart of ice and a will of iron. The man whose decree had seen omegas like me stripped of rank and status, pushed to the fringes, deemed unworthy. He was destined for a high-born alpha female from the southern packs, a political alliance to unite the territories. He was unreachable, untouchable, a god among wolves, and he was dying in my arms, his gaze locked on mine. There was confusion in them, then a flicker of something else, something wild and primal. His breath hitched. His wolf, which I'd heard was dormant, broken by some long-ago tragedy, was stirring. I could feel it, a tremor of power radiating from him, a pressure building in the air. His lips parted, stained with his own blood. He tried to speak, his voice a raw, broken whisper, barely louder than the wind. Just one word. A word that made the world stop turning. A word that shattered my solitude and sealed my fate. Mate. The word hung in the frozen air between us. Mate. It was a sound that did not belong here, in this place of blood and death. A word of destiny spoken by a man who was owed none to me. My mind rejected it. My heart, a wild, stupid thing, stuttered in my chest. Denial was a cold, sharp blade. He was delirious, bleeding out. The Grieve-White's venom was probably coursing through his veins, making him see things, making him say things. That had to be it. It was the only explanation that didn't shatter the world. His storm-gray eyes slid shut, the brief moment of consciousness gone. His head lolled back into the snow, and a fresh wave of blood, dark and thick, pulsed from the gash on his side. Panic clawed its way up my throat. Delirious or not, he was the Alpha King. If he died here, on this mountain, his guards, his entire kingdom would tear this land apart looking for him. They would find the Grieve-White, they would find my tracks, and they would find me, an Omega, wolfless and alone, standing over their king's corpse. They would not see a savior. They would see an assassin, a killer. I had to run, disappear, flee deeper into the peaks where no one would ever find me. It was the smart thing to do, the only thing to do, but my feet wouldn't move. I looked down at him, at the blood melting the snow, at the faint puff of his breath that was growing weaker with every second. My wolf, the one I didn't have, howled in my soul, a phantom limb aching with a need I couldn't name. Protect him. The command was not my own. It rose from a place deeper than thought, older than reason. I cursed the moon. I cursed fate. I cursed the weakness in my own heart that refused to let me abandon a dying wolf, even if he was my sworn enemy. Fine, I snarled to the uncaring wind. Fine. Getting him back to my cave was a nightmare. He was a mountain of a man, all dense muscle and heavy bone. I was strong for an Omega, hardened by years of surviving alone, but he was nearly twice my size. I half dragged, half carried him, my arms hooked under his dead weight a terrible anchor. Every step was a battle. My boots slipped on the icy terrain. My wounded ribs shrieked with every pull, sending shards of white-hot agony through my chest. The Grieve-White's blow had done more damage than I'd thought, but I gritted my teeth, tasting blood, and pushed on. His scent was all-consuming. It clung to me, soaked into my clothes, filled my lungs. Ozone and pine, storm and earth. It was a dizzying, intoxicating perfume that made my head spin. It whispered of power, of safety, of belonging. Lies, all of it, but my treacherous body responded anyway. A deep thrumming starting in my bones, a warmth spreading through me despite the biting cold. The entrance to my cave was hidden behind a curtain of frozen waterfall, a secret place I had found long ago. It took the last of my strength to haul him through the narrow opening, his body scraping against the ice-slicked rock. Inside, it was a different world, small, safe. The air was dry and smelled of wood smoke, and the dried herbs I kept bundled and hung from the ceiling. A small fire pit in the center held glowing embers, casting a soft, warm light over the small space. My sleeping pallet, a thick bed of furs, lay against the far wall. It was my sanctuary, and I had just brought the biggest danger I had ever faced right into the heart of it. I managed to drag him over to the furs, his body slumping onto them with a heavy thud. He was pale, so pale. The gash on his cheek was stark against his ashen skin. For a moment, I just stood there, my breath tearing from my lungs, my body screaming in protest. The cave, my quiet haven, felt suddenly too small, charged. His presence filled it, a living, breathing storm that sucked all the air out of the room. Then I moved. Survival kicked back in. Work was a balm to a frantic mind. I stoked the fire, adding more wood until it blazed, chasing the deepest shadows from the corners. I filled a pot with snow and set it near the flames to melt. While it heated, I rummaged through my wooden chest, pulling out my meager medical supplies. Clean cloths, a needle and sinew thread, and a pungent salve of crushed willow bark and comfrey root. I had to get his shredded leathers off. My hands hesitated for a fraction of a second before I forced them to work. This was about survival, his and mine, not anything else. The leather was thick and cold, stiff with his frozen blood. Cutting it away was easier. As I worked, I uncovered the full extent of his injuries. The White's claws had torn through his side, leaving 3 deep, parallel gouges that were still sluggishly weeping blood. His shoulder was dislocated, the bone a hard, unnatural lump beneath the skin. And there were bruises everywhere, dark and violent. But underneath the new wounds, there were scars. So many scars. A roadmap of a brutal life, etched into his skin. Old, silvery lines from blades. The puckered, raised flesh of a burn on his forearm. Faint claw marks over his ribs. Each one told a story of a battle fought, a challenge met. He hadn't been born into his crown. He had bled for it. A strange, unwanted pang of respect went through me. I worked methodically, my motions practiced from years of tending, my own injuries. I cleaned the wounds with the hot water, my touch as gentle as I could manage. His skin was hot, feverish. When my fingers brushed against the unmarred skin of his stomach, he flinched in his unconscious state, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The sound vibrated right through me. It wasn't a threat. It was a possessive, instinctual noise. His wolf knew me, even if the man did not. My pulse hammered against my throat. He's delirious, I reminded myself. My own voice, a frantic chant in my head. It means nothing. Setting his shoulder was the worst part. I had to brace my foot against his ribs and pull, using all my body weight. The sound of the bone popping back into its socket was sickening, but a soft sigh of relief escaped his lips. The lines of pain on his face eased just a fraction. Stitching the wounds on his side was a slow, painstaking process. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside my frozen waterfall, and the only other sound was the whisper of the sinew thread passing through his skin. The scent of him, of his blood, was making me lightheaded. Finally, I was done. I slathered the wounds with my healing salve and wrapped his torso tightly with clean strips of linen. I covered him with every spare fur I owned, piling them high. His fever was getting worse. The monster's claws were always coated in filth. Infection was the real enemy now. I sank back on my heels, exhausted. My whole body ached. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the harsh lines, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. It was a lie. There was nothing vulnerable about this man. Even unconscious, he radiated a power that felt like a physical weight. My small cave, my whole world, had tilted on its axis. I watched him breathe. The steady rise and fall of his chest under the furs was a strangely reassuring sight. What was I going to do when he woke up? He would know me, not just as the woman who saved him, but as the Omega whose existence defied his own laws. A wolfless hunter living on forbidden land. He would see me as a threat, an anomaly to be eliminated. The word he'd spoken mate would be forgotten, dismissed as a fever dream. He would not, could not, claim me. An Omega mate for the great Alpha King? The clans would riot. His alliances would crumble. He would be seen as weak, cursed. He would have to reject me, and a formal rejection from a true mate. It didn't just break your heart. It shattered your soul. For a wolfless Omega, it would be a death sentence. A cold dread seeped into my bones, deeper than the winter chill. I had saved him from the Grievewhite, only to deliver myself to a far crueler fate. He stirred, a low moan escaping his lips. I froze, every muscle tensed. His head turned on the furs, his brow furrowed in pain. His hand, large and calloused, emerged from under the pelts, searching for something. His fingers brushed against my knee. A bolt of lightning shot up my spine. Hot, fierce, it rooted me to the spot. His hand closed around my leg, his grip surprisingly strong. He wasn't holding me down. He was anchoring himself. His eyes opened. They weren't cloudy with delirium anymore. They were clear, sharp, and focused entirely on me. That stormy, silver-shot gray pinned me in place, stripping away all my defenses, seeing right into the terrified heart of me. He stared for a long moment, the silence stretching until it was thin enough to break. His lips parted. His voice was a raw rasp, a sound of gravel and thunder. "You're real!" The words were a hammer blow to the silence. My breath seized in my lungs. I tried to pull my leg away from his grasp, but his fingers, though weakened, held firm. Not with force, but with a desperate, unyielding certainty. His eyes, they were the storm, and I was the ship being torn apart in them. "Let go," I whispered, the words barely audible. It was a plea, not a command. He didn't. He couldn't. I saw the struggle on his face. The man, the king, was fighting the wolf. And the wolf was winning. "I've searched for you," he rasped, his voice raw. "In dreams, in the scent on the wind." I thought I was mad. My heart hammered against my broken ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. This was worse than rejection. This was a hope so sharp, so bright, it would gut me when he finally came to his senses and tore it away. "You're feverish," I said, my voice colder than I felt. I forced myself to move, to break the spell. I reached for the wooden bowl of lukewarm water and a fresh cloth, my movements stiff and clumsy. "You were attacked. You're confused." I tried to dab the cloth on his forehead, but he turned his head, his gaze never leaving mine. His grip on my leg remained. "My wolf is not confused," he stated. It was a simple, terrible fact. He has been sleeping for 10 years. A whisper, a ghost. Tonight, he woke up. He saw you. The air grew thick, heavy. Every instinct I had honed for survival screamed at me to run, to put distance between us. But his touch was an anchor, and his words were a chain. I leaned away, putting the bowl down with a clatter. "Your wolf is mistaken. I am. No one." It was the truest thing I could say. I was Risa Fenlo, the wolfless Omega, the outcast, a ghost who hunted other ghosts in the mountains. I had no pack, no name that mattered. He finally let go of my leg, and for a second, I felt a dizzying sense of release, but it was only so he could push himself up, bracing on one elbow. A deep groan of pain was ripped from his throat, and his face went pale with the effort. "Don't," I started, moving to push him back down. My hand landed on his bare shoulder. Fire, a white-hot, cleansing fire, shot up my arm, straight to my core. It was not the heat of his fever. It was something else. A current, a recognition. My soul, a thing I didn't even know was listening, answered a call I had never heard. He sucked in a sharp breath, his eyes widening. He felt it too. The world outside, the cave, the wind, the snow, the entire northern clans, it all vanished. There was only the rough texture of his skin under my palm, the sound of our mingled breath, and the impossible, undeniable pull between us. The mark. A true mating bond leaves a mark, a silver tracery on the skin over the heart. It appears only when the bond is accepted. I didn't have one. But deep beneath my skin, in that exact spot, a dull, dormant ache I had lived with my whole life suddenly flared into a sharp, burning needle of heat. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. I stumbled backward, away from the furs, away from him, until my back hit the cold, damp stone of the cave wall. I slid down to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees, trying to hold myself together. He watched me, his expression unreadable. The king was back in his eyes now, assessing, calculating. The raw instinct was still there, but it was caged behind a will of iron. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice stronger. This time, laced with the authority he could not shed, even here, broken and bleeding. "I am the one who kept you from being a monster's meal," I bit out, my fear turning to anger. It was safer than the alternative, safer than the burn. A flicker of something gratitude, perhaps, crossed his face. "For that, you have my life's debt." He paused, his gaze sweeping over my small, sparse home. The hanging herbs, the neatly stacked firewood, my worn hunting gear. But that is not what I asked. "My name is Risa." I offered him nothing more. "Risa," he repeated, the name a strange sound on his tongue. It felt like he was tasting it, judging it. "You live here? Alone?" I nodded, my chin tucked tight against my chest. He was silent for a long time. The only sound was the fire spitting and hissing. "The seers in my court," he began, his voice low and contemplative. "They spoke of my mate long ago. They cast the stones, read the smoke." He looked at me, his eyes searching for something I could not give him. "They told me her spirit was incomplete, barren, that she would be born without a wolf's soul." Ice flooded my veins. Incomplete, barren. The words the elders of my own pack had used when they cast me out. The shame of it was a cloak I had worn for so long. I had forgotten its weight. He saw the flicker of recognition in my eyes. He saw the truth I was trying so hard to hide. "They said she would never survive the wild," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "That her scent was erased by the fates, a blank space where a soul should be. They declared her lost to the world, dead before she had ever truly lived. A lie told in a throne room that had become my reality in the frozen wastes. Someone had wanted me gone, forgotten, erased." "Your seers were wise," I said, my voice hollow. "I have no wolf." He ignored my surrender. He pushed himself up further, the furs pooling around his waist. The firelight played over the hard planes of his chest, over the fresh linen bandages and the old, silvery scars. "But you have a scent," he countered, his nostrils flaring slightly. "I smell it now. Under the smoke and the herbs. It's faint, deliberately hidden, like a spring thaw buried under a late snow. Wild chamomile and cold stone." He knew. He was smelling the truth of me, the part I had spent my life suppressing, hiding from predators and packs alike. He swung his legs over the side of the pallet, hissing in pain as the movement pulled at his stitches. "Stay down," I ordered, my own alarm making me bold. "You'll tear them open." "Not until you come here," he commanded. Not a request. A royal decree, spoken in a hunter's cave. My body was frozen. My mind was at war with itself. Every fiber of my being screamed to obey the Alpha King, to obey the pull of my mate. But my life had been built on one single rule: trust no one, especially not an alpha. No. The word was small, but the defiance of it echoed in the silence. His eyes narrowed. For a terrifying second, I saw the predator he was, the conqueror, the king who had bent the entire North to his will. The air crackled, the shadows seemed to deepen, but then the hardness in his face broke. It was replaced by a look of profound, soul-deep weariness, of a pain that had nothing to do with his physical wounds. "Please," he said. The word was broken, undone. It was the sound of a man who had not pleaded for anything in his entire life. "Risa, please." That one word did what 1,000 commands could not. It broke me. Slowly, reluctantly, I unfolded myself from the floor. I walked toward him, each step feeling like a march toward my own execution. I stopped just out of his reach, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. He didn't move. He just looked at me, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "They lied," he breathed, the realization dawning in his eyes, a cold, hard fire being lit in their depths. "All these years, they lied." He reached out, his hand hovering in the space between us. An invitation, a question. I didn't take it. I couldn't. He let his hand fall. "When I was a boy, my father told me that a king's mate is his greatest strength, but also his most profound weakness, a vulnerability his enemies will seek to exploit." He looked down at his own scarred hands. "He told me to guard her existence above all else." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold crept down my spine. This wasn't just a prophecy. This was politics. Betrayal. "Who are your enemies, Your Majesty?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Orvan's gaze lifted from his hands and met mine. The sheer, glacial fury in them made the breath catch in my throat. It was an ancient, unforgiving cold, the promise of a vengeance that would freeze the world. "Everyone who told me you were dead." The name of his enemies hung in the air, a silent, deadly promise. And I was standing right in the middle of it. Me, the proof of their betrayal, the living, breathing reason for a king's wrath. My small, quiet world of snow and survival had just been invaded by the politics of crowns and daggers. I was no longer a hunter. I was a secret, a weapon he could use, or a weakness to be hidden away again, more permanently this time. The fire popped, a sharp sound in the tense silence. It was the only thing that dared to move. He was still watching me, the fury in his eyes banking into a low, dangerous smolder. He was putting the pieces together, years of lies falling away to reveal a truth that had been hunted, same as me. "They took you," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion, sharp and jagged as broken glass. "From your family, from your pack. They made you an outcast so no one would ever look for you." He didn't know how right he was. I remembered the whispers, the sideways glances, the shame in my parents' eyes. They had been told their daughter was a curse, a wolfless void, an omega who would bring ruin. It had been easier for them to believe the lie, to push me away, than to fight against the current of prophecy. Easier to let their only child walk into the wilderness to die. I had just refused to cooperate. I didn't answer him. I couldn't give him that part of me. The wounds from my own pack were too old, too deep. Instead, I turned away, busying myself with the pot of melted snow. "You need to drink, and I have broth." It was a dismissal, a pathetic attempt to regain control of my own cave, my own life. He let me have it, for now. He leaned back against the wall, the movement slow and pained, and watched my every move as I ladled some of the thin, herb-laced broth into a wooden bowl. My hands trembled slightly. I was used to the scrutiny of predators, But this was different. The grieve white had wanted to eat my flesh. This king, he seemed to want my soul. I brought the bowl to him, careful not to touch him. I held it out. He didn't take it. "You feed me," he said, his voice low and rough. My eyes snapped to his. It was a test, a command wrapped in a need. He was too weak to hold the bowl steady, but it was more than that. It was an act of submission. An alpha, a king, allowing an omega to care for him in this intimate way. It was an acknowledgement of what lay between us, spoken without a single word. My throat went dry. Slowly, I knelt in front of him. I raised the bowl to his lips, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He drank, his gaze never leaving mine over the rim of the bowl. His lips were chapped and pale. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the fever still burning within him. When he was done, a single drop of broth clung to his bottom lip. Without thinking, my thumb brushed it away. The contact was electric. A jolt, sharp and sweet, that made my fingers tingle. His skin was rough with a day's worth of stubble, but underneath it was a warmth that had nothing to do with the fever. It was life, pure, potent, alpha life. His breath hitched. A low rumble started in his chest, the sound of a waking predator. I pulled my hand back, but it was too late. The scent of him, of ozone and pine, intensified, thickening the air, and my own scent, the one I kept so carefully banked, answered him. A faint, traitorous whisper of chamomile and rain-washed stone. It was the scent of a receptive mate. His eyes darkened, the silver specks in their gray depths igniting like stars. "Risa." My name was a growl, a prayer. "Your wounds," I stammered, scrambling for an excuse, a reason to put distance between us. "I need to check the dressing." I reached for the bandages on his side, my movements jerky. My fingers fumbled with the knot. Unwrapping the linen, I saw that the stitches were holding, but the skin around them was red and inflamed. The grieve white's poison was working its way through him. "This is bad," I murmured, my hunter's instincts taking over. "The fever will get worse before it gets better. You need a purgative, and willow bark tea for the inflammation." He didn't seem to be listening. His attention was fixed on the space just above my collarbone. "Let me see it," he commanded, his voice soft, but with an edge of steel. I froze. "See what?" "The place where the mark should be." My hand flew to my chest, covering the spot. "There's nothing there." "There is," he insisted. "I can feel it. A shadow, an echo. My wolf has been calling to it for years, a name whispered into an empty room." "Let me see." This was too much, too fast. He was tearing down walls I had spent a lifetime building. "No." He reached out, his hand moving with deceptive speed. He didn't grab me. His fingers just gently, inexorably, pushed my hand away. His touch was a brand, his gaze a vice. I was trapped. His fingers, calloused and warm, traced the neckline of my tunic. He didn't rip it. He just hooked a finger in the worn fabric and pulled it aside, exposing the pale, unmarked skin over my heart. He leaned closer, his breath warm, on my neck, sending shivers down my spine. He stared at the spot, his focus absolute. "It's there," he whispered, a strange note of awe in his voice. "Faint. Like a star you can only see if you don't look directly at it. It's sleeping." My skin burned where he was looking. The deep, internal ache I'd felt earlier intensified, a throbbing pulse that matched the beat of his heart. He was right. It was there, a ghost of a bond, a promise that had been silenced, but never broken. His head lifted, and his stormy eyes met mine. They were filled with a raw, possessive fire that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "They tried to sever it," he snarled, the fury returning, colder and deadlier than before. "They used blood magic, a curse, to hide you from me, to make the bond wither and die." He shook his head, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "But they failed. It's weak, but it's alive." He leaned in, his lips brushing against the sensitive skin of my neck, just below my ear. He wasn't kissing me, he was scenting me, an act of claiming so primal, so possessive, it stole the air from my lungs. My head fell back against the cave wall, my eyes fluttering shut. My body, my long-denied instincts, betrayed me completely. I leaned into his touch, a soft, involuntary sound escaping my throat. His arm snaked around my waist, pulling me against his hard, warm body. The pain from my ribs was a distant thing, drowned out by the roaring in my ears. He was so strong, even injured. A mountain, a fortress. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. It was the most dangerous feeling in the world. Mine, he growled into my skin, the vibration of it sinking into my bones. You were always mine. The word broke the spell. Mine, not as a mate, as a possession. A lost treasure that had been reclaimed, a key to his revenge. I shoved against his chest, my strength surprising both of us. I am not yours, I cried, scrambling away from him. I belong to no one, not my pack, not you. I got to my feet, putting the fire between us. It was a flimsy barrier against a man who commanded armies, but it was all I had. He watched me, his expression hardening again. The brief moment of connection was gone, replaced by the cold mask of the king. You saved my life, he said, his tone flat. That creates a debt, the bond between us. That creates a claim. By all the laws, old and new, you belong to me, Raisa Fenlo. I don't care about your laws, I shot back, my voice shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in years. Your laws left me to die on this mountain. My survival is my own. I earned it. It does not belong to you. He actually smiled, a grim, harsh stretching of his lips that held no humor. And yet, here we are. A king in a hunter's cave, a wolfless Omega with the ghost of a royal mark on her skin. Do you think you can fight fate? I have. For 10 years. It is a battle you cannot win. He tried to stand, to rise and face me, but his body betrayed him. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he swayed, his hand going to his head. A low groan escaped his lips. The fever was spiking. The poison, he muttered, his voice thick. My anger evaporated, replaced by the cold, clear focus of the healer. The hunter. He was my enemy. He was my fate. He was my mate. But right now, he was just a man dying in my care. Lie down, I said, my voice softening. I will make the tea. He collapsed back onto the furs, his breathing growing shallow and ragged. His eyes, when they met mine again, were clouded with pain and fever. The king was gone. Only the wolf remained, and he was losing his fight. As I moved to my stores of herbs, grinding the willow bark with my stone pestle, I felt his gaze on me. They will be looking for me, he said, his voice strained. My royal guard. They will track my scent. The blood. I paused, my back to him. He was right. Sooner or later, his soldiers would find this place, and they would find me with their king. When they find you, I said, not turning around. What will you tell them? The silence stretched. I could feel the weight of his decision. He could claim me, drag me back to his court, a political firestorm in his wake, or he could deny me, thank me for my service and cast me aside, leaving me to the mercy of those who wanted me dead. His answer, when it came, was not what I expected. I will tell them, he rasped, each word an effort, that I was saved by a monster hunter, and that the mountain has a new queen. The mountain has a new queen. The words echoed in the small cave, a royal decree that had no place here. A queen. He said it as if it were a simple fact, a stone placed upon a board. But to me, it was a brand, a cage, a death sentence with a gilded name. I didn't turn around. I couldn't let him see the terror on my face. Queens lived in castles. They were surrounded by courts and whispers, by politics and poison. They did not have dirt under their nails, and the blood of monsters on their blades. Queens were alphas, born to rule. I was an omega, born to be forgotten. I finished grinding the willow bark. The rhythmic scrape of stone against stone, a comforting, familiar sound in a world that was rapidly coming undone. I packed the shavings into a small muslin bag and dropped it into a pot of steaming water, the bitter, medicinal scent filling the air. His fever was climbing. I could feel the heat of it from across the cave. His breathing was shallow, punctuated by guttural groans of pain. The Grievewhite's poison was virulent. It didn't just kill, it tormented, twisting the mind with fever dreams and paranoia before it finally stopped the heart. He was losing time. We were losing time. They won't find your trail, I said, my voice flat, my back still to him. The storm that's coming will cover it. It will bury the clearing, the blood, the monster's corpse. It will bury everything. I could feel his surprise. What storm? The one the wind has been whispering about since sunset, I replied, finally turning, the pot of tea in my hands. The kind that silences the world. You have a day, maybe 2, then your guards will find nothing. His eyes, glazed with fever, cleared for a moment. He was seeing me again, not as a mate, not as a woman, but as a creature of this mountain, someone who understood its language, its secrets. Respect flickered in his gaze. It was a more potent currency to me than any declaration of queenship. I knelt beside him again, the steam from the tea warming my face. I blew on the hot liquid before holding the cup to his lips. "Drink," I ordered, my voice soft but firm. All of it. He obeyed without argument this time. The fight was being burned out of him. He drank greedily, the bitter tea a dark stain on his pale lips. When he was done, he fell back onto the furs, a tremor running through his massive frame. The poison was fighting the remedy. His body was the battlefield. For the next few hours, there were no words, no kings, no mates, only the primal, desperate struggle for life. I bathed his face with cool water, forced more tea and broth into him, and listened to the incoherent whispers that escaped his lips. He spoke of battles, of a black wolf that ran at his side. He spoke a woman's name, not mine, a name that was torn from him on a raw cry of grief. Cora. He spoke of a promise, a failure, a crown that felt heavier than a mountain. I was an unwilling voyeur to the wreckage of his soul. The great Alpha King, the man of iron and ice, was built on a foundation of loss. The dormant wolf, the decade of silence. It wasn't a curse of magic. It was a curse of grief. And his wolf had woken up for me. The thought was a terrifying, humbling thing. As the night deepened, the promised storm arrived. It did not come with a roar, but with a whisper. The wind died down, and a profound, bone-deep silence fell over the mountain. Then, the snow began. Not a flurry, but a thick, determined curtain of white descending from a sky the color of slate. I sat by the fire, sharpening my blade, the rhythmic shee-eeing of steel on whetstone, the only sound besides Orvan's ragged breathing and the soft hiss of the falling snow. I was trapped, with him, with the truth of what we were. Sometime before dawn, his fever broke. One moment, he was burning, his skin radiating a terrifying heat. The next, a great shudder racked his body, and a sheen of sweat broke out on his brow. His breathing deepened, evening out into the slow, steady rhythm of true sleep. The crisis was over. He would live. A wave of relief so profound it made my knees weak washed over me. I hadn't realized how tightly I had been wound, how much of my own energy I had poured into his survival. I slumped against the wall, my head falling back against the cold stone, and closed my eyes for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. When I woke, the light in the cave had changed. A soft blue-white glow filtered through the curtain of ice at the entrance. The storm had passed. The world was new, buried under a thick blanket of fresh snow. And he was watching me. He was sitting up, the furs pooled around his waist. The color had returned to his face. The lines of pain had eased. His stormy eyes were clear, sharp, and achingly intelligent. The king was back, but the wolf was there too, looking out from behind the man's eyes. It was a tangible presence now, awake, alert, and focused entirely on me. "Good morning," he said. His voice was still rough, but the desperate edge was gone. It was a voice of pure command. I just nodded, my throat tight. "The storm is over," I said, stating the obvious. "And my guard will be riding again," he finished. "They will be casting search patterns. It will not be long before they are here." He said it so calmly, as if a squadron of the North's most elite warriors arriving at my doorstep was a common occurrence. "You should go," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Now. Before they find, you hear, before they find me." He raised an eyebrow. "And where would you have me go, Risa? I am still wounded. I have no weapon, no supplies. Am I to walk down your mountain and greet them?" He had me trapped. Every word was a move in a game I didn't know how to play. "I will pack you supplies," I offered, my voice strained. "I have dried meat, a waterskin. It will be enough." "It won't," he said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate. "I am not leaving without you." The finality in his tone stole my breath. "I told you, I am not going anywhere." "You have no choice," he replied, his voice hardening. "You think the people who hid you from me will be pleased to learn that you have failed to die?" That you are alive, and that you are my mate? They will not send a grieve white for you next time, Risa. They will send assassins. They will burn this mountain to the ground to see you turn to ash. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my defiance. He was right. I had been safe in my anonymity, a forgotten ghost. Now, the Alpha King knew my name. I had a face. I was a threat to a conspiracy powerful enough to lie to a king for over a decade. My little cave was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb waiting to be sealed. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my anger and fear tangling into a knot of pure despair. "I want what is mine," he said, his voice softening again. "I want my mate. I want the woman who faced down a white to save a stranger. I want the hunter who knows the secrets of the wind." He paused, his gaze intense. "But I know you will not come willingly. You are a creature of the wild. You will not be caged." He understood. That small bit of understanding was more disarming than any command. "So," he continued, a new calculating light in his eyes, "we will make a bargain. I don't make bargains with kings. You will with this one," he said. "It is a bargain for your freedom." I waited, my heart a trapped bird. "My guard will arrive," he began, laying out his strategy. "I will tell them what I told you, that you are the hunter who saved me. I will name you warden of this pass. A title, a position of authority. I will decree that this mountain, from the tree line to the highest peak, is your domain, that no one, no pack, no lord, no soldier, is to set foot here without your express permission. I will make your sanctuary a fortress, protected by my own law." It was a tempting offer, a royal shield around my solitude, but there was a price. There was always a price. "And in return?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His eyes darkened. The wolf looked out, possessive and hungry. "In return," he said, his voice a low growl, "you will accept the bond." My breath hitched. "What?" "Not the mark," he clarified, seeing the panic in my eyes. "Not yet. I will not force that on you, but you will acknowledge what is between us. You will not run from me. When I call for you, you will come. You will allow me to court you, to prove myself to you. As a man, not just a king." He was offering me a choice that was not a choice at all. He was offering to protect me from his enemies, but only if I bound myself to him. He was forging a cage out of silver words and royal decrees. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. His face became a mask of cold granite. "Then I will have no choice but to take you with me now. For your own protection, I will lock you in the highest tower of my fortress, with a dozen guards at your door, until you see reason. I will not lose you again, Risa. Not to assassins, and not to your own stubborn pride." The threat was real. I saw it in the hard set of his jaw, in the glacial cold of his eyes. He would do it. He would drag me from my mountain and put me in a cage, all in the name of protecting me, of possessing me. There was no escape. He had blocked every path. My freedom for a leash, my solitude for a gilded prison. But the leash came with a shield, and the prison came with time. Time to think, time to plan. And in his world of lies and conspiracies, time was a weapon. I looked at him, the Alpha King, sitting amidst my humble furs, his body a tapestry of scars and secrets. He had been lied to. He had been betrayed. He had lost a mate before, I suspected, in the grief-haunted whispers of Cora. He was a man clinging to a second chance, using power and threats to secure it because it was the only way he knew. A strange, dangerous pity stirred in me. "You promise?" I asked, my voice small. "The mountain will be mine? No one will enter?" "You have the word of a king," he vowed. The gravity in his voice was absolute. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine and ozone, and fate filling my lungs. I had hunted monsters my whole life. Now, I was making a deal with a monarch who hunted them too. "All right," I whispered, the word feeling like a surrender and a declaration of war all at once. "I agree." A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. It transformed him. The cold king vanished, and for a fleeting second, I saw the man, the wolf, the mate, and the sight of it made my heart ache with a terrifying, impossible hope. Just then, a sound cut through the quiet morning. Faint, but clear. A horn. His guard. They were close. Orvan's smile faded, replaced by a look of grim purpose. He got to his feet, his movements surer now, stronger. He was still injured, but the alpha was reasserting its dominance over the weakness of the flesh. He walked toward the cave entrance, toward the light, a king ready to reclaim his world. He paused at the edge of the ice curtain, his silhouette a dark, powerful shape against the blinding white of the snow. He turned his head, his stormy gaze finding mine in the shadows. "The lie is over, Risa," he said, his voice a low, dangerous promise that echoed in the sudden silence. "Now, the hunt begins." The hunt was over, and a new one had just begun. The horn blast echoed off the peaks, a sharp, brazen sound of iron and order. It sliced through the sacred silence of my mountain, a trespass of the highest order. It was the sound of the world I had fled, come to reclaim what it had lost. Orvan stood like a statue carved from shadow, his gaze fixed on the blinding snow outside. The king had returned to his skin. The wounded wolf was still there, but now it was caged behind a will of steel. "They're here," he said, the words a low rumble of satisfaction. My heart, which had just begun to slow its frantic pace, kicked into a wild, panicked rhythm. I felt like a fox in a trap, the hunter's footsteps growing closer. My instinct was to bolt, to find a back way out, to disappear into a crevice where no one could follow. But my feet were rooted to the floor. I had made a bargain. The sounds grew. The crunch of many boots on snow, the jingle of mail and harness, the low, disciplined murmur of men trying to be quiet and failing in the profound stillness of the high peaks. Their scents rolled into the cave ahead of them. Cold steel, oiled leather, sweat, and the sharp, anxious smell of wolf. They were alphas and betas, warriors, their combined presence a suffocating wave of power and dominance. My small cave felt like it was shrinking, the stone walls closing in. I instinctively backed away, melting into the deepest shadows by my sleeping furs. I was a ghost again. It was my safest form. "Stay where I can see you," Orvan commanded, not looking at me. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of an iron chain. I stopped. A figure appeared at the entrance, blocking the light. He was nearly as large as Orvan, clad in black steel plate and thick wolf pelts. His face was grim, bisected by a jagged scar that ran from his hairline to his jaw. He saw Orvan, and the relief that flooded his features was so potent, it was almost a physical force. "My king," the man breathed, dropping to one knee in the snow. "We thought." The blood trail ended. "We feared the worst." "The worst found me, Malik," Orvan replied, his voice calm and cold. "I merely found it wanting." He stepped forward, out of the cave, and into the brilliant, unforgiving light. The man, Malik, rose. His eyes, the color of hardened steel, swept over his king's injuries, the pale face, the crude bandages visible beneath his torn tunic, a muscle in his jaw clenched. "Who did this?" Malik snarled, his hand going to the hilt of his greatsword. "Give me a name." "A Grieve White," Orvan said, "old and strong. It will trouble these passes no more." Malik's gaze flickered to the entrance of my cave, his eyes narrowing as he tried to pierce the shadows. He scented the air. He smelled me, chamomile and stone. "Omega. Wrongness." "You were not alone, sire," he stated, his voice laced with suspicion. This was it. The moment the bargain was struck, or shattered. "No, I was not," Orvan said, his voice ringing with authority across the snow. He turned slightly, his gaze finding me in the darkness. "An invitation, a command. Step into the light." My blood ran cold. Every survival instinct screamed at me to stay hidden. But the promise of his threat, the tower, the guards, was a more terrifying prison than this moment of exposure. I took a breath. Then another. I walked forward, my worn leather boots making no sound on the stone floor. I emerged from the shadows and stood at the mouth of my home, blinking in the sudden brightness. The collective gasp from the dozen warriors assembled behind Malik was a sharp, hostile sound. They stared. At my patched clothes, at the hunter's blade at my hip, at my face, which held no alpha pride, no beta confidence. They saw the soft lines of an omega, a wolfless one. They could smell the void in me where a wolf's spirit should have been. To them, I was less than nothing. A stray, a curse. Malik's face hardened into a mask of contempt. "An omega?" he spat, looking at Orvan as if his king had gone mad. "This is who you found?" "This." Orvan, said, his voice dropping, taking on a dangerous edge that made the air crackle. Is Risa Fenlo, the hunter who killed the Grieve White when I could not, the healer who stitched my wounds and kept me from the fever's grip. He let the words sink in, a heavy silence falling over the assembled guard. He took a step toward me, closing the space between us, a deliberate, public alignment. He was a mountain shielding a sapling. She is the reason your king still draws breath, he continued, his voice resonating with power. And for her service, she is owed a reward. He turned to face his men, his gaze sweeping over every one of them, a king daring any to challenge him. From this day forward, Risa Fenlo is named Warden of the Frosttooth Pass. This mountain, and all the lands it touches, are hers. Her word here is my word. Her law is my law. None shall set foot upon these slopes without her leave. Those who do will answer to the crown. The shock was a palpable thing. It rippled through the soldiers, a wave of disbelief and outrage. I saw them exchange glances. An Omega, given a title, given land, given authority over alphas? It was unthinkable. A violation of the natural order. Malik looked as if he'd been struck. Sire, you cannot be serious. She is under my protection. Orvin finished, his voice like the cracking of a glacier. Is that understood, Captain? The challenge was absolute. Malik's loyalty versus his prejudice. His jaw worked for a moment, the scar on his face turning a livid white. He looked from his king to me, his eyes filled with a cold fire. But he was a soldier before all else. He bowed his head, the movement stiff with resentment. As you command, Your Majesty. The bargain was sealed, forged in the cold morning light, witnessed by a dozen hostile wolves. I had my fortress, and my leash. The journey down the mountain was a silent, tense affair. They gave me a horse, a quiet mare that seemed to sense my unease. I had never ridden before, and the strange, swaying motion was disorienting. I felt exposed, torn from the earth I knew so well. Orvin rode beside me, a great black stallion found tethered with the others. He looked every inch the king, even in his torn clothes, sitting straight despite the agony his wounds must be causing him. His men followed, their silence a heavy, disapproving blanket. I could feel their eyes on my back. I was the Omega who had somehow bewitched their king. I was a mystery they intended to solve, and I had no doubt their methods would be cruel. We made camp as the sun began to set, in a sheltered grove of ancient pines at the base of the mountain. The air was warmer here, thick with the scent of loam and damp moss. A proper fire was built. Rations were distributed. The quiet, efficient movements of a military camp unfolded around me. I felt like a ghost at their feast. I took my share of salted meat and hard bread and retreated to the edge of the firelight, my back against the rough bark of a pine. I was in their world now, and I was suffocating. After he had spoken with Malik and his lieutenants, Orvin came to me. He moved stiffly, the long ride having taken its toll. He carried 2 steaming mugs of a dark, fragrant tea. He handed one to me, his fingers brushing mine. The spark was still there, a jolt of warmth in the cooling air. He sat beside me, not close enough to be a threat, but not far enough to be a comfort. They will learn to respect you, he said, into the quiet. They will learn to fear you, I corrected, my voice low. It's not the same thing. He didn't deny it. Respect will follow, when they see you as I do. You see a mate you were denied, I murmured, staring into the crackling flames. They see an abomination. A low growl rumbled in his chest. I see a survivor, a queen in all but name. He took a slow sip of his tea. Malik brought news. The lords who sit on my council are growing restless. They whisper that my grief has made me weak, that my failure to produce an heir has broken the crestfall line. He turned his head, his profile sharp and grim in the firelight. They are the same lords whose seers told me my mate was dead. The pieces clicked into place. They weren't just liars. They were conspirators. They wanted his throne, and I was the key to solidifying his claim. An heir would silence them. A true mate, found against all odds, would be a sign from the fates that he was the rightful king. But a wolfless Omega mate? That could be twisted. It could be used against him. She is a curse, a blight. He is weakened by her. This bargain, I said, my voice tight. It's not just for my freedom. It's for your crown. He looked at me, his eyes holding no deceit. Yes, he admitted. Our survival is now linked, Risa, whether you wish it or not. He reached into his tunic and pulled something out. It was a dagger, its sheath made of black, scaled leather, its hilt a simple, unadorned piece of polished obsidian. It was a weapon of lethal simplicity. Not a king's decorative blade, but a killer's tool. He held it out to me, hilt first. "What is this?" I asked, eyeing it with suspicion. "A gift," he said. "The title of warden is just words. Law. Men can twist both. This is a symbol. It was my father's. He gave it to my mother on the day he asked her to be his queen. It is the mate's blade. It signifies that the queen is the king's shadow, his final guard, the one who protects him when all others have fallen." My breath caught. It was more than a gift. It was a vow. It was an offer of trust so profound it made my head spin. He was giving me a weapon. He was giving me the one thing that could get close enough to end his life. "He is placing his throat in your hands," my soul whispered. Slowly my fingers closed around the cool, smooth hilt. It felt perfectly balanced in my palm. A part of me. I looked up at him, at this impossible, infuriating, wounded king. He was laying his power, his life, his crown, at my feet, asking for nothing but the one thing I was terrified to give: trust. "The lie is over," he had said. But here, in the firelight, a new truth was being forged, one of blood and steel and a bond that refused to die. I slid the blade from its sheath. The steel was dark, like captured night, and impossibly sharp. As I looked at my own reflection, distorted in the polished metal, a new scent cut through the night air. It wasn't pine. It wasn't campfire smoke. It was faint, carried on a sudden shift of the wind, but it was unmistakable. It was the scent of a grieve white, but it was wrong, tainted. It was mingled with another smell, the scent of a wolf. I froze, the dagger held tight in my hand. My eyes met Orvan's. He had scented it too. His entire body went rigid, the wolf within him rising to the surface. The scent wasn't a monster hunting a wolf. It was a monster being used by a wolf. A tool, a weapon. The scent was coming from the direction of his own camp. From his own men. One of his royal guard was a traitor, and he had brought the rot of the mountains down with him. The wind had a new voice. It no longer hissed with the promise of ice and emptiness. Now, it hummed. A low, resonant song that spoke of thawing earth and the sweet, sharp scent of pine sap rising in the sun. It whispered through the peaks, not of things that hunt, but of things that grow. I stood on the precipice, the highest ledge of my mountain, and I listened. The sun was a warm weight on my shoulders, melting the last stubborn patches of snow in the crevices of the ancient stone. Below, the great expanse of the north stretched out, a tapestry of dark forests and glittering rivers. My kingdom, not by right of a crown, but by the right of my own soul. A familiar warmth pressed against my back. A strong arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me against a chest that was as solid and unyielding as the mountain itself. The scent of ozone and deep earth, a scent that was once a storm, was now my anchor, my home. "You are listening for monsters, my love?" Orvan's voice was a low rumble against my ear, the title of king shed as easily as a winter cloak. "No," I murmured, leaning my head back against his shoulder. "I am listening for the silence, the peace." It's still a strange sound. It had been a year since the night of the horn blast and the revelation in the firelight, a year since the traitor had been unmasked. Malik, his resentment had festered into treason, fed by the whispers of the lords who wanted Orvan's throne. He had been the one to guide the Grieve White, using a cursed lure, hoping it would finish a job they were too cowardly to do themselves. The fight had been short, brutal, and fought not in a throne room, but in the mud and snow of our camp. It was not a king who fought that night, but a wolf defending his mate. And it was not a broken Omega who stood at his side, but a hunter with a king's blade in her hand. The council of whispers was silent now. Some had fled. Others had bent the knee, their plots turned to dust by the irrefutable truth of the bond they had tried to erase. The north was secure, but we had not stayed in the stone fortress to rule it. The fortress had come to us. Orvan had kept his promise. He ruled from a fortified lodge built in the valley below my peaks, a place of wood and stone and roaring fires, not cold corridors and intrigue. He had brought his throne to my wilderness. He had learned the language of the wind. His hand, large and warm, came to rest on my stomach, a gentle, possessive pressure. "The silence will not last forever," he said, a soft smile in his voice. "Soon there will be a new sound, a new heartbeat to listen for." A thrill, sharp and sweet, went through me. An heir, not a political necessity, but a child of a bond that had defied magic and murder. A child who would be born not into a cage of prophecy, but into the freedom of the wild. She will have your eyes, I whispered. And your spirit, he countered, his lips brushing my temple. The mountain will teach her to be strong, and you will teach her to be wise. He turned me in his arms, his stormy gray eyes, now clear of all shadows, searching mine. The grief for his sister, Cora, the loss that had silenced his wolf for a decade, had finally found its peace. He had told me her story, a tale of a shadow curse that had taken her too soon. He had thought his wolf dead from the pain of it. It was not dead, I had told him. It was waiting for a reason to wake up. Now, his wolf was a constant, steady presence, looking out from his eyes. It was at peace. It was home. The lords in the south still whisper, he said, his expression growing serious. They say the king of the north is ruled by a wolfless omega, that his mate bears no mark of the bond. My hand instinctively went to the spot over my heart. The skin was still bare. The ghost of the bond was a constant warmth beneath it, a thrumming connection that tied my soul to his. But it had never broken the surface. I had never allowed it to. I was warden of the mountain, a hunter. I was Risa. I did not need a mark to know who I was. Do you care what they whisper? I asked. I care that they see it as your weakness, he growled. When I know it is your greatest strength, you have a stillness in you, a human heart that tempers the wolf's fire. You are the balance I never knew I needed. He placed his hand over mine, his fingers covering my own. His warmth sank through my skin, seeking the dormant brand. But it is not for them, he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that still made my heart ache. It is for me. Let me see you, Risa, all of you. Let me show them that you are not just the mountain's queen. You are mine. It was not a demand. It was a plea. The same raw vulnerability he had shown me in the cave, broken and bleeding on my furs. He was offering me the last piece of his heart and asking for the final. Lock on mine. My fear, my old familiar companion, was gone. It had been replaced by a love as vast and enduring as the mountains around us. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. I took my hand away, leaving his to rest on the place where our souls were entwined. I gave him permission. I surrendered. He closed his eyes, and I felt it. A surge of power, of pure, unadulterated love, flowing from him into me. It was not a taking. It was a giving, a completion. The warmth beneath my skin bloomed. It was not a burn, but a dawn. A soft, silver light spread beneath the surface, tracing intricate patterns like frost on a winter window. It was a map of constellations, a swirl of moonlight and magic, and in its center, the crest of his pack, a wolf's head crowned by a mountain peak shone with a gentle, steady luminescence. The mark of the Alpha King's mate. It felt right. It did not feel like a brand of ownership. It felt like my own soul, finally visible. A single, happy tear traced a path down my cheek. Orvin opened his eyes, and a slow, wondrous smile spread across his face as he looked at the glowing mark. There you are, he breathed, as if he were seeing me for the first time. He leaned down and pressed his lips to the mark, a kiss that was a vow, a prayer, and a promise all in one. The silver light flared, and I felt the bond snap into its final, unbreakable place. We were one. He lifted his head, his eyes shining. My queen, my king, I answered, my voice clear and strong. We stood there as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The world was quiet, wrapped in the profound peace of the high places. The wind whispered around us, a gentle caress. It no longer spoke of what was lost or what was hunted. It spoke only of what was found. The moon had seen our scars long enough. Tonight, she watched them heal.